time and place for the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for January 24th. Public notice having been given of the time and place, I now call the meeting to order.
Members of this board present at this meeting have read the official minutes of the Board of Trustees regular meeting January 10th, 2011. Now therefore be resolved that this board approves the minutes as entered in the official minutes, and be it further resolved that the reading of the minutes be dispensed with.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Reports?
We have the village justice report for the month of December. There were a total of 235 cases, 118 vehicle and traffic, 61 criminal, village ordinances 30, 13 civil cases, 12 ABC laws, and 1 environmental case. Total fines and surcharges of $24,254.50.
Received and filed. Any others?
Yes, we have the building inspectors reports for the month of November and December of 2010. November building inspectors report shows that there were a total of 27 building permits issued with a valuation of $83,966.32 and $1,224 collected in fees. 11 certificates of compliance for residential rental properties with a total of $830 collected in fees, and 16 certificates of compliance for commercial fire and safety inspections, $1,305 collected in fees. Total fees for the month were $3,359.84. For December, there were a total of 8 building permits issued with a total valuation of $775,000, $2,332.10 collected in fees. 19 certificates of compliance for residential rental property, $1,780 collected in fees, and 20 certificates of compliance for commercial fire and safety inspections, $1,700 in fees. Total fees $5,812.10.
Received and filed. Any other reports?
We have the fire department annual report for 2010. This report can be viewed at the clerk's office. There were a total of 1,569 incidences for the year.
Received and filed. Any other reports?
That's it for the reports.
Correspondence.
Correspondence was received from E. Lawrence Barter, recording secretary for the Fredonia Fire Department, notifying the board that Leonard Wasinski was elected as third assistant chief at the January 5th, 2011 meeting.
Received and filed. Any other correspondence?
Yes. Did you have some letters you wanted to read?
Yeah, I guess.
Or do you want me to just read the way it's here?
Yeah, read it the way it's here.
Okay.
Just base it on the letter.
A letter dated today?
The 18th.
The 18th. Letter dated 1/18 of 2011. Was received from Mayor Michael Sullivan recommending Michelina Comerford to the zoning board.
Be resolved that Michelina Comerford is hereby appointed to the zoning board of appeals to serve a 4-year term.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
We also have a letter dated 1/18/2011 received from Mayor Michael Sullivan recommending William Loftus as an alternate member to the planning board.
Be resolved that William Loftus is hereby appointed as an alternative member of the planning board to serve a 5-year term.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. I would just point out that the terms are different because of filling in vacancies for unexpired terms. We've got them on a annual basis where the positions come up for 5-year terms. But because of the staggering and a person leaving before their term was up, some of the terms are different. Any other correspondence?
That's it for correspondence.
Now is the time and place for the public portion. Anyone here that wishes to address the board, now is the time and place. Please stand, state what's on your mind. There being, we'll get to you guys after. There being no one wishing to address the board, I'll close the public portion and we'll continue with resolutions.
Where the Board of Trustees desire to enact a policy of employees' use of the fuel facility at the DPW, a copy of which is attached to the resolution, and whereas the Board of Trustees have reviewed the attached policy, now therefore be resolved that the policy for use of the gasoline, fuel, oil, for the village purposes by the village employees as set forth in the attached policy statement is hereby adopted, and be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees reserves the right to amend said policy from time to time as deems necessary, and be further resolved that a copy of the policy be distributed to the village department heads with the direction that the department head give each employee within the department a copy of this policy, and that the employees sign and acknowledge of receipt of the policy, and that said policy be posted within the department facility in a prominent location.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Whereas the Board of Trustees desires to enact a sexual abuse and molestation prevention policy for the Village of Fredonia, a copy of which is attached to the resolution, and whereas the Board of Trustees have reviewed the attached policy, now therefore be resolved that the policy is set forth in the attached statement is hereby adopted, and be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees reserves the right to amend the said policy from time to time as it deems necessary, and be it further resolved that a copy of the policy be distributed to the village department heads with the direction of the department head give each employee within the department a copy of the policy, and that employees sign and acknowledge the receipt of the policy, and that said policy be posted with the department facility in a prominent location.
Second.
Oh, go ahead.
Did we adopt the previous policy that we should, in this resolution, say the previous policy, be it the result of the previous policy adopted by this board regarding gasoline usage rescinded, or jackets we adopted? Go ahead.
Did we ever actually adopt one, or did we have a temporary policy put in place?
I don't think we had adopted one.
Like in the last couple of months? No, I
Yeah.
don't think we've ever adopted the policy.
When we implemented that plan.
Oh,
Remember
yeah.
the-
Then we changed it to one way of doing things.
Why don't we take with that resolution, perhaps we amend it to be it further resolved that any other previously adopted policy is hereby superseded. Okay, that way if we've got an older one.
Right,
Okay, if
exactly.
not, we're done. I know we did implement some rules, but I don't think we ever had a formal resolution to do that. So we could have a motion and a second to
I'll
that
make that
amendment.
motion to make that change.
Second that?
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
All in favor of the first resolution then as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
All right, it's a long one. Whereas the Board of Trustees of the Village of Fredonia desires to act a new Chapter 233 of the Code of the Village of Fredonia entitled Sexual Offender Residence Restrictions, and whereas proposed local law number 1 of 2011 of the Village of Fredonia entitled Section Offender Residing Restrictions in its final form has this day been laid upon the desks of the members of the Board of Trustees for purposes of enacting a new Chapter 233, and whereas the said proposed local law reads as follows. Section 1, the Code of the Village of Fredonia is hereby amended to add a new Chapter 233 entitled Sexual Offender Residency Restrictions, which shall read as follows. Chapter 233, Sexual Offender Residency Restrictions. 233-1, Legislative Intent and Purpose. The Board of Trustees of the Village of Fredonia, Village Board, finds and it determines that the due recidivism rate among convicted sex offenders following the release from confinement, there exists a heightened potential for reoccurrence of their crimes when they reside, have employment, or frequent areas where children are likely to regularly congregate, such as public or non-public elementary, middle school, and high school, child care facilities, playgrounds, parks, public or private youth centers, or public swimming pools. B, the village board further determines that it is essential that the Village of Fredonia to make effort to protect children from sex offenders who have committed sexual offenses against minors. C, the village board further determines that it is in the best interest of the health, the safety, and the welfare of the residents of the Village of Fredonia, and particularly its children, to establish residency restrictions and restrictions on the location of employment and or other activities for sex offenders who have committed sexual offenses against minors. D, it is purpose of the chapter to prohibit sex offenders from residing, having employment, or otherwise entering and remaining in 1,000 feet of areas and facilities that would provide them easy access to potential victims. Section 233-2, definitions. As used in the chapter, the following terms shall have the meaning indicated. Child care facility, a licensed and or registered nurse, preschool, child daycare center, group family daycare home as defined by the New York State Social Services law. Child safety zone, within 1,000 feet of the real property comprising a public or private elementary, middle, or high school, child care facility, nature preserve, park, playground, public or private youth center or public swimming pool, public or commercial recreation facility clearly designed to attract children. Employment, doing work, whether or not the financial gain. Residence, the place where a person sleeps, which may include more than one location and may be mobile and/or transitory. Sex offender, a person who has been convicted of a sexual offense against a minor as defined in paragraph 1 of 168A of the New York State Corrections Law and has received under Article 6 of the New York State Corrections Law and Level 2 sex offender designation who have been determined under said law to pose a moderate risk of committing another sexual crime, or a Level 3 sex offender who have been determined under said law to pose a high risk of committing another sexual crime. Section 233-3 restrictions. A sex offender as herein defined shall not reside within a child safety zone. B, a sex offender as herein defined shall not have employment within a child safety zone or assigned work or site of location within a child safety zone. C, a sex offender as herein defined as shall not loiter the purpose of committing any crime within a child safety zone. D, a sex offender as herein defined shall not granted the peddler's permit by the village or door-to-door sales or solicitations. Section 233-4 exceptions. A sexual offender is herein defined entering and remaining with the child safety zone does not commit a violation of chapter if any of the following apply. The sex offender is serving a sentence or jail, prison, juvenile facility, or other correctional institutions or facility, or an inpatient in a hospital, hospice, mental health facility, or nursing home. B, the residency of the sex offender was established prior to the effective date of this chapter. C, the sex offender established employment prior to the effective date of this chapter. D, the sex offender attends primary, secondary, post-secondary child school that would otherwise be a violation of this chapter. However, the exception does not apply to an individual who initiates or maintains contact with a minor within the child safety zone. E, the sex offender only immediately the sex offender only intermediately or sporadically enters a child safety zone for the purpose of work. However, the exception does not apply to an individual who initiates and maintains contact with a minor within the child safety zone. F, the sex offender is a minor or a ward under guardianship. However, this exception does not apply to an individual who initiates or maintains contact with a minor within the same child safety zone. G, the sex offender enters a child safety zone for the purpose of exercising the right to vote. However, the exception does not apply to the individual who initiates or maintains contact with a minor within the child safety zone. Section 233-5, relocation. Any person who resides or lives in a child safety zone or defined in 233-2 shall have 90 days from receipt of written notice of probation set forth whether to move. Failure to move in the location within compliance with the section within the time period shall constitute a violation of this chapter. Section 233-6, penalties of offenses. The first violation of the provision of this chapter shall be punishable with a fine up to $1,000 and imprisonment up to 15 days in jail. The second subsequently violation shall be punishable by a fine up to $2,000 and imprisonment up to 30 days in jail. Section 233-7, enforcement. The Village of Fredonia Police Department shall have the power to enforce the provisions of this chapter. Section 233-8, cessation of restrictions. The restrictions as forth in the chapter shall cease when the sex offender is no longer required to register and verify pursuant New York State Corrections Law, Article 6C, Sexual Offenders Act. Section 2, this law shall take effect immediately upon filing the local law within the Secretary of State of the State of New York. Now therefore be resolved, the public hearing be held before this Board of Trustees of Village of Fredonia on February 14, 2011 at 7:30 p.m. at the Trustees Room, Village Hall, Fredonia, New York, to consider the question of enactment of the said proposed local law. And be it further resolved that the clerk is hereby authorized to cause notice of the said public hearing published in the Observer as required by law.
Second. Second.
Do we have part of those reread? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Whereas the Village of Fredonia has completed a comprehensive plan to guide redevelopment in the community in order to ensure the village remains a desirable location for residents to live, work, and play, and whereas this comprehensive plan has been prepared in accordance with Section 722 of New York State Village Law, and whereas the Village of Fredonia has determined this plan to be complete and sufficient for public review, and whereas in accordance with Part 617 of the implementing regulations pertaining to Article 8, State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQR, of the Environmental Conservation Law, the Fredonia Village Board would like to begin the environmental review process of this comprehensive plan by requesting lead agency status. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Fredonia accepts the draft comprehensive plan as complete for public review and request designation as the seeker lead agency in accordance with the regulations for the purposes of conducting a coordinated review of this action. And be it further resolved that the draft comprehensive plan be made available for public review at the Village Hall and other specified locations, and that comments will be accepted from the public. And be it further resolved that the Village Board will begin the seeker coordinated review process by performing the required lead agency mailings to involved and interested agencies, issuing the appropriate notices, and releasing the plan for public review. And be it further resolved that in accordance with Section 239M of the General Municipal Law, that the Village Board further authorize that a copy of the comprehensive plan and the required notice be sent to Chautauqua County Planning Board for review and comments.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
At this time, can we set the,
Yeah, if you're sure that it's 30, at least 30 days?
it's at least 30
Okay.
days. It's-
Maybe you want to just add, to get further resolved, that a public hearing be held by the Board of Trustees.
Okay, be it further,
Be it further resolved, that a public hearing be held before the Board of Trustees of the village on February 28, 2011, at 7:30 PM at Village Hall,
that's just what I wanted to hear.
to consider the adoption of the comprehensive plan. Be it further resolved that a notice, legal notice of the public hearing be published in the Evening Observer as required by law.
Could we have that as a separate resolution, Sam? I think we should probably be separate from the seeker. I mean, seeker's a specific statute. I don't know if we should combine
I
it. I
think
mean, it's simple enough what you've said to have that as a separate resolution rather than amending.
Okay.
All right. So if we're all in agreement as proposed, we have somebody to move that recommendation. And a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of the public hearing being called for February 28th?
8th, 2011, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Be it resolved that the notice of annual village election attached hereto is hereby approved and is deemed to be part of this resolution as incorporated herein at length, and be it further resolved that the village clerk is hereby authorized to post and publish said notice as required by law.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Be it resolved that Thomas and Neer, 122 Central Avenue, Fredonia, Spring Street, Fredonia, and Samuel Kaiser Jr., 65 Spring Street, Fredonia, are hereby appointed to the Fredonia Cable Television Advisory Board to serve 2-year terms effective immediately.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Oh,
Say 2 minutes?
I don't know, did we get Marcia Marins in there as well?
You know, no, but I mean,
no, we didn't,
did you miss that name there?
I
Is there
didn't catch
two-
that.
2-year
You
terms.
only said two names, did you not?
Yes.
You got all 3 names? Yeah.
Jonathan Wolfson, 10 Spring Street. Is that the third name? Serve a
Yeah.
2-year term
Yeah.
effective
Yeah, you
immediately?
missed that name,
We're gonna do Marcia at the same time, and,
Oh, weren't we gonna,
or hold on to that one for,
yeah, just,
just to make sure nobody that's currently on the board?
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Be it resolved that the attached schedule of budget transfers pursuant to Section 5-520 of the village law is hereby approved.
yeah. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Any other resolutions at this point? If not, we're going to do something a little different than we have in past meetings. We had an issue that has been ongoing, and we were downstairs, and we were anticipating that it might go a little long. So we decided we might need to call for a special meeting. So before we adjourn our regular meeting, we're now going to have discussion on the draft contract with the town of Pomfret regarding the sale of water from the village to the town of Pomfret to supply Phase 1 of the Pomfret North Water District. Sam, you've got a draft of an agreement that's before us. If you could, with us, go through what still needs to be resolved, and we'll work on that.
First of all, I did talk to Bob Pavone from Wendell, kind of coordinate with him, and he provided some information. I also talked to DEC, to them. They're the ones that again repeated that they want a contract with the city of Dunkirk before a contract is signed. They also indicated that they were satisfied if we would send them a draft that we felt Mr. Clavoon did, that was pretty much final draft form, even if not signed. Okay, now I'll get into, and the other thing is, there's some of the things in here are boilerplate. You know, basically a lot of this I took from previous contracts that we've had with the town of Pomfret, where the town and the village have come to agreement on basic terms. But there are certain unique things in this contract that weren't in the Berry Road or Chestnut Street or Chautauqua Street water districts. One of them we should discuss is how to handle the Leona line. That line comes down from the reservoir. It's a very old line and services residents in Leona, and I think 2 or 3 up Route 83. The unique thing about it is I think the village would like to say, here at Town of Pomfret, you take it and it's yours, and repair it and so forth. However, it does serve part of it does come into the village, and provides water to the village. So how that's going to be maintained, I think Mr. Clavoon suggested that they would take care of any service lines, private lines that connect to the main line. However, I think it would be, we should have in there that if the village ever discontinues that line, and Jack's indicated that's a possibility, Jack Boland, that's in the future, that we could discontinue that line as far as providing water to the village. If that event happened, then the line should definitely be turned over to Pomfret, because it no longer serves any village purpose. I would suggest that that be put in the contract.
That would be number 17, I think, is the area. Sam, maybe the easiest thing, since we've all got a draft in front of us, and I know the town representatives have a draft in front of them, let's go down through here and point out what you feel, and let's go in order.
You want to go through the draft that I did here, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I'm only looking for the ones that you feel are still in need for discussion. We've had some exchanges. We've had the town comment on the draft that we had proposed, as well as their engineers. I think we're down to about 5 or 6 issues. So instead of worrying about the specific language on things that are more boilerplate, let's get down to those that we need to make a decision on, so we can decide if there's a decision that we can make in the next few days, so that we can call a special meeting. And if we can't, how soon we could meet to make the decision on these things.
Well, the one of them I just discussed was the Leona line.
Right, that's number 17 on the list. I'm just thinking the easiest thing is to go from page 1. I don't see anything on the first page or the second. The language we've received for the description of phase 1, that'll be inserted.
And we've received that, right?
Can I make a comment on the rate charge for water? The contract with the city of Dunkirk is going to be, if we're buying water from the city of Dunkirk, we're being charged 1.75 times the city rate. We're charging 1.7 times to the town. Should there be some stipulation of?
Whatever their rate is may not be the same as ours anyway, so whatever their 1.75 is, you're thinking, I think we've already agreed with the town that we're gonna do 1.7. Our goal is not to buy water on that. If we do, then we may be facing a cost, but I don't think we can hold town now to our cost with the city.
But I thought that was part of the whole deal. Whatever it costs us to buy water or to produce water, that the rate to the town is 1.7. I mean, if we're paying, whatever we're paying, theirs is 1.7.
Well, yeah, so if we're paying that to the city, then it's gonna be built into the, they're gonna get hit at 1.7 of that rate anyway, because it's gonna be an expense that our whole system has. So
So
the following
whatever
year,
our rate, whatever our cost is always, whether our cost fluctuates, the towns will fluctuate right along with our cost.
No, but that 1.7, what you're saying is that 1.75 never changes, so if it does go up, that 1.75 is gonna go up with it.
No, the rate, the 1.7 rate is never gonna change, because that's times our cost.
I understand that, I
Right.
understand that.
So the cost will go up, but the rate never changes.
if
You're
we,
saying this is different from the city of Dunkirk.
yes, it will be,
Right.
it will be.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna pay us 1.7, whatever our rate to our users is.
Right.
our rate to our users will have to reflect, if we have to buy water,
That's right,
it
yeah.
will be using unappropriated fund balance to cover it at that time. And then the next year, we would have to increase the rate. And then when we increase the rate to recover that money that we had to spend, they'll be paying for that cost at 1.7 or
Right.
whatever our current rate is. So it will be reflected. It may well be a lapse, because we can't immediately turn around and say, now we've had to pay this. But likewise, we aren't gonna say that to our other users either.
Right.
We're
So
gonna have
whatever
to,
we're paying, yeah, theirs will be
Yeah.
1.7.
they're always gonna pay 1.7, so it's, if we're paying $5 a gallon, they're gonna pay 1.7 on that to us. So we're gonna get our add-on regardless. It's just, it's part of one of the other costs, same as our personnel would be. At that point, if we had to spend that much money to buy the water.
As long as we're on the 1.75, I know it talks a lot about the North Water District, that we're talking about phase one, but I believe the agreement that we made in March was that we were gonna have that rate for all of our water districts, Berry Road, Chestnut, all the existing water districts. And that's
This,
not-
but this agreement is only for phase one.
But we did agree on the water rate changing for all of the districts.
I believe that's the case, but this contract is only for
Okay.
phase one.
All right.
That's another
I
discussion.
know when I read it, I only talk about a certain amount of gallons, and it's just for the phase one.
Yes. So,
Okay, the other, want me to continue on?
yeah,
I'm gonna have to a little skip around, page 13 of the draft. We talk about termination. Confer wanted a statement in there that they'd be given any notice, and I inserted that unless it's an emergency, the village will give advance notice of any termination to the town. Now, how much days that is, the village would have to come up with a reasonable figure, but unless it's an emergency, there would be a notice given.
they'll also be given notice, as any other user of our system gets, if we have to go into any of our conservation under the existing emergency management plan. So they would get that notice as well. We're not gonna be distributing it to all their consumers, they'll have to do that. But they'll get the same notice as all of our users get if we have to implement that plan.
That plan's in place with Berry Road and Van Buren.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, it's a plan that we've had in place for a number of years that determines at certain levels of the reservoir, we have to begin either extra observation, if we have to begin voluntary conservation, and when we begin mandatory conservation. And obviously, there is language in here that they have to comply with any of the requirements we have, so that would be one, but we would provide that same notice that we're giving to the other customers that, you know, we're now into no lawn watering, and you're gonna have to make sure that your residents in your system enforce that. If we're gonna tell the village residents they can't water lawns because we're in an emergency, they can't be watering them out in the town either.
There was a provision in there that the town submit a certification from its engineers to the village that there would be no adverse impact. The town objected to that, but at the same time said that we are willing to pay the village. The village hires an engineer, to which we need to do. We need to have an engineer review plans and specs on behalf of the village, as well as review the contract documents for anything that we may have omitted in order to protect the village water distribution system from any adverse impact from the water district.
What page?
What page
What
is
page
that?
is that?
I mean, I really think, Sam, if we could go from page one, let's go through this, and, I mean, if it relates to something, if we get to page 4 and it also relates to the paragraph on page 7, I really want to go through this and hammer out what we need to still resolve. I see there's some things on page 4 that are single space. I'm assuming those are different than existing language, and that's why you set them out in
Okay,
some
let's
fashion.
continue on then. Meters and billing, village.
Where?
Wait, we're on
Page
page
4.
4.
Page 6.
Okay.
Page 6,
Page six.
item 6.
No, we're talking about page 4?
Page 4, responsibility for water main,
Yeah.
master meters, et cetera. It's on page 4.
Okay. Well, the sentence that I bolded and underlined,
Yep.
the town had objection to that sentence.
Okay, so the single space, is a change or a?
The bolded that says shall not release the town,
Bottom of the fourth.
that last sentence was objected to, as I understand it, by the town.
Well, when we talked about this before, we had it reworded. reworded it the last time we talked about it, that we could say the same thing in a different manner.
They're already agreeing, the sentence above
Yeah.
it, they're agreeing to correct any matters which we identify as adversely affecting our system.
That's what we talked about. We talked about axing that last sentence because
Just take the
because
last
it was a
one
moot
because-
point.
Right.
You know, we have it in a different location.
Right, and right above it, they're saying that they'll correct it, and they had no problem with indicating they would make the corrections.
What's ahead of that is acceptable, as I understand it, to the town, so they
Okay, so-
want
and this-
what's bolded deleted.
So we're gonna take out that last sentence.
Correct.
Yep.
Is there something in C, Sam, because I see that single spaced as well?
You know, this is a problem of Mike with word processing.
Okay, well, I just wanna make sure
It's
because-
not nothing,
Okay,
I'm
so
just
you-
trying to correct, I do
Okay,
it all
so
this
that's not
myself.
something you set out, so we would
No.
call our attention to it. Okay, so C is okay, there was
Yeah,
nothing.
If it's a double spaced or space and a
Okay.
half, this will all be
All
edited.
right. And the next thing that I see a note on here says needs discussion is E,
Yeah.
okay?
There's gonna be water lines constructed through the village. Who's gonna maintain those lines, who's gonna own those lines, because they're gonna be carrying water, they're gonna be connected to, our residents are gonna be connected to those lines. And we had in the proposal that the town would reconnect those people who they disconnect, reconnect them to the new line. And I think there was an objection to that.
I think the concern comes down to who's going to pay for the cost of the actual connections for the residents to that line. The town is gonna remain responsible for the line on West Main Street and the line on Scander Drive, because they cannot transfer that to us until they've paid for the project. So they will be responsible for maintaining the line, the service line. They'll be taking on that responsibility that normally would be our own, because they own it.
What lines are running through the village?
They,
Skyandro,
these are not existing lines, Sam. These are ones they are going
Yeah,
to
I know,
construct.
I understand that.
Skyandro Drive, and West Main.
And we had talked about that kind of being a quid pro quo for the line in Leona.
Leona.
There wasn't anything.
We can't do that because we can't transfer a new line within our system that we haven't paid for yet.
What we're saying is, just the idea is,
No,
our idea is,
you said-
you guys are gonna be responsible for this, so we would continue with Leona, and then
Right.
when everything's paid off, we could decide about transferring at that time, which
Right.
would be
Later on.
years down the
We'll
road.
all be dead by then. Well, you won't, Adam. Whippersnapper.
Yeah.
At least Tommy.
Who cares?
I never know.
Be on your shoulders, Tommy.
I'll be 35 by then.
Oh, that's ancient.
Hey, Tommy, see you in Jack.
Don't ask me what
There
you
was a
said.
hold harmless provision, and they wanted added that it wouldn't hold harmless from any negligence of the village, and I added that in.
Where are we on E here?
Going down to 5.
Right.
All right, but on E,
That-
we're covered that we understand they're maintaining that water
They're
line.
gonna maintain it,
Okay.
it'll be theirs, but they'll maintain and repair it, as
Right.
long as it's their line.
Just their line. Okay. Hold harmless.
The hold harmless, the only objection the town had there is to make sure the town did not hold harmless the village from village negligence, and I
Right.
added in there, the town shall not be responsible for indemnifying the village for damages to the extent attributable to the negligence of the village.
Okay. And we got the billing and all that stuff. What's the
Uh,
next thing, Sam?
That's sort of my,
I'm just looking down here. Next thing would be on, there was language to add in the AWA specifications for meters and the standard of the meter.
put that in there.
I see it's in there. Paragraph B on page 7. Your engineer recommended we use AWWA specifications in there.
We use the same meters that you use. We're already set up for that. We did it on purpose because of the Leona situation. When we went to the new meter system, we got the same meters that were out there so that we could
Good.
work everything together.
Number 7, Sam, I assume, that's the language that came out of the Berry Road on liability, or, excuse me, on
Almost word for word.
connections outside of the district, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Number 8, expansion, that is also out of theirs.
Yeah, now, here's the thing, I've heard a couple times, well, take out the language from the Berry Road, put it, well, the Berry Road is very strict, it said, no connections can be made, and it's at Chestnut Street also, no connections can be made to those lines without coming to the village for a review. And there's never been a problem with that. We've never had any problems with our water districts review. Existing water districts have worked very well. But this is a large water district. It's over 10 miles of 8-inch and 12-inch lines. I don't know if that's even been resolved yet.
8-inch.
8-inch lines. Pulling from each side of the village, west to east, to Portland, to Sheridan. I felt there that for the village provides the water up to the maximum amount that's in the contract, 27 million gallons a year. There may be large projects, it's possible. This contract's 20, 30, 25 years, 30 years old, but 30 years in length. There might be something that goes in there of a commercial nature, a subdivision. The village would not want to get involved in subdivision approval or anything, but they ought to have the right to at least review the plan, only restricted in terms of the water that's going to be demanded from the village. And the village should have that control to say, and a standard that it relates only to any adverse effect upon a water distribution system. If there's some development going in that's going to roil up the village water or something, or any potential from that, the village board ought to say, let's take a look at that. Not single-family dwellings or but if it's a commercial use, the board just ought to have the right to review it, not say we don't want this type of factory, this type of something, strictly limited to the water use. And that I think is important to have in there.
Okay. That's, which one, Sam? Is that number 11 or number 8?
Yeah, 8.
Expansion.
Okay.
Well, 8 is, that's in all our contracts.
That's it. Well, the language you're just talking about.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
7 and 8 together?
7 and 8.
I think it's 7 on 8.
It actually goes, it's my note on page 9, because
Okay.
on page 9, it said any subdivision, housing complex, commercial business, or other user besides single or double family homes, I don't think we're concerned about that, would require prior village board before connecting to any water main. Purpose of this section, give the village an opportunity to see if there's any adverse impact on our water system.
That's the same as
That's the
the
same
Bear
as-
Road contract.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more liberal because Berry Road, there's just no connection, not even a new house can be built out there without the village board taking a look at it.
Now,
And of course, the
water-
outside limit would be, can't go beyond the $27 million unless
Right,
the board
gallons,
okays
it
it.
adds to that.
Right.
Now, number 11, though, it's
Yep.
part of that, Sam, is
Yeah.
What did I say?
$11 million?
Dollars? Oh, okay.
Darn, he caught that one.
Sam, looking totally, though, at paragraph 11 now,
Yeah.
limited to normal residential purposes. And you've got in there agriculture, commercial. Now, there is going to be some commercial. They have, in this district already, some commercial properties.
I would say
We
with
fully
that,
intend that that would be covered. We all agree that agricultural is prohibited.
I would say, so the village has the right to at least look at it. The commercial users, is there many commercial users in this district? Right, the present ones right now.
18.
That are, yeah, that are presently connected to the lines, to our lines. There isn't any, is
But
there?
doesn't that fit in with the paragraph?
Other than everything on the east side of the city, the northeast side, you got your restaurants.
Oh,
Yeah. Existing commercial users, I would say, Mayor, would be all right. It would be any expansion of that.
They're already there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, those would be fine. If it's anything new, the village ought to have a chance to review it, only limited in scope to the amount, to the impact it might have on our distribution.
So if they had a huge car wash.
A huge car wash, even if it's within the limits of the contract, it may impact the distribution system. The village ought to at least take a look at that to make sure that that's not a problem.
Okay, well, let's look at it this way then. If we can say that the water sold to the town under this agreement shall be limited to residential and commercial purposes only, based on the water quantity in paragraph 1.
What you want to say is any new commercial use should be reviewed by the board in terms of how much, if there's an impact on our system.
But the thing is, right now, they're all going to be potentially new commercial use if they're in that district. Any business opening, any commercial enterprise opening in that after January 1st of 2011, because when we were doing all of this and the planning was being done, we knew what the businesses were. So if anyone that has opened a commercial use after January 1st, 2011, we would need to review it.
Right.
Because we all agreed that we had a certain amount of use, and a certain amount of water we were going to sell, and we knew that they had commercial, and their report indicated a certain percentage of their water use was commercial. So this would say anybody trying to open a new business now. That way we don't have somebody who's out there right now trying to get something going, figuring they're going to have this water coming. If it wasn't in place December 31st of 2010, they would have to have our approval.
Have approval. It may be a perfunctory exam, but at least if there's going to be a potential problem, the village will be able to catch it before it gets out of hand.
All right, so commercial use, starting after January 1st, 2011, would require village review.
To determine if there's any impact. I can get the wording.
Okay.
I'll get the
All right.
wording.
And then the other, that sentence above it, I would just have agricultural / or commercial use is prohibited, because that is a given.
Yeah.
And then we'll add the line in for commercial. Now,
That was one that concerned me, that just so that we have a right to review any hookups.
well, it may be, Sam, the language could maybe duplicate what you've got in there already on any subdivision, housing complex, commercial business, well, you know.
Yeah, that's kind of the language I was looking at.
But date it, let's date it, any of those things after January
December
1st, because
Okay.
and then we don't have to rewrite anything. Just cross off commercial above, use this language, make it any of those things after January 1st. If they're new, we didn't anticipate them, your engineers didn't anticipate them, we now know that we have to work through
Yeah.
that. Okay.
I'll get that wording.
I mean, all you got to find is a place, I think, to put the date in there. And then the rest of the language, I think, is
Yeah.
what we want.
I didn't get the exact language I'm going to use. This is basically the language that should be in there, just to make sure that we had a chance to look at it.
And the note, I
rest of
think,
the contract, that was an important provision in my mind to have in there.
well, you might even be able to take your note down there, Sam, like the last sentence, the village retains the right to examine any commercial or housing demands built after January 1st, 2011, to make sure there's no adverse.
Or
Just use that last
expansions
sentence.
of any existing restaurants.
You got that language in that note that we might be able to use for that.
Yeah.
Repair of water line breaks, there's nothing in there. What's the next thing, Sam?
I think the town was agreeable to backflow preventers, conservation measures, all that. Hmm?
Back up on the backflow preventers. If anybody who's on a well is going to be cut off from their well, they will no longer be able to use that in their house at all. So their wells are going to be cut off. There'd be no way that they can contaminate the village water system. As far as backflow preventers are expensive. And we're going to be cutting off these people anyway. If they want to use their well to wash their cars or whatever, they can do that, but they can't leave that well connected to their house once we connect them to the potable for the village water.
So therefore, there would be no need to put the
Correct.
back.
So we'll put in their provision that if you're not going to put backflow preventers in there, that
Disconnected from the well.
any person desiring village water would disconnect his well from use of domestic water from his well.
Health department won't let
Yeah.
you hook both of them.
Right, that's,
They're not going to let them do it.
Yeah.
We've had backflow preventers in our agreements with Concord. There is there may be a well that doesn't go to the house, I don't know. It might go to the barn.
But you guys are okay with the requirement, and you're gonna have something in there, and you're gonna enforce that if you're on, or the health department's going to enforce.
The health
Correct.
department.
Okay.
And we'll make sure before you connect that that's done, just for everybody's town's protection and our
Yes.
protection.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want nothing coming back.
Town's responsible for all expenses within the district.
Where are we at, Sam?
I'm on page 12, top of page 12.
Okay, so 10 is fine, 11 is fine?
Yep,
Yeah.
Okay.
moving on.
Just going back to page 11 on the droughts, if there's a drought in the village and the mayor declares an emergency, he would have the right to have that emergency given to the town supervisor, or to you, Jimmy, and it would be implemented in the town.
We gotta follow all your rules.
Yeah. I mean, we, yeah, applies here, it would apply out top.
But you guys have to be ready to enforce them. We're not gonna be able to, you're gonna have to.
How many enforcers? We got the enforcement.
All right.
19 was, we just went over that.
Okay, now. We did 17, 18, 19. Well, 19, we probably can move back up to, so we don't have it in two different places.
Yeah, there's a
I
couple
had a
of
hard
things that are
time
two different-
getting
Yep.
this thing
All right,
on
19
my
will,
word processor.
and 19 will move up to,
There was
become part
probably some-
of paragraph 11. All right. Do we need number 20 in there, Sam? Because we don't want to have to sit around each of the connections to the houses that are already there. If we put the language in, any changes, anything built after January 1st.
Oh, you want 20 in there. If the 27 million gallons a year is exceeded,
No,
We've
I'm sorry,
already said
we're on a
that.
different one here. I'm looking at number 20,
page 12.
on page 12, number 20.
20 and 12?
No line connection of
Yeah.
any kind without first obtaining village board approval.
That's the 27 million gallons.
Okay, but we already have that in there in paragraph 3, right?
Right.
What I'm saying, and we've also got in there,
Paragraph 3, all of paragraph 3 is it tells you what the amount of water is that's being sold. This paragraph says
But we
that you
just
go,
talked about not hooking up subdivisions and not hooking up
Without village approval.
Yeah,
without
that's-
village approval.
there's a difference. That would apply even if you didn't exceed the 27 million gallons. This paragraph says if you go beyond the contract limits of 27 million gallons a year, if you got to that limit, then the
What-
board-
well, we're all reading different paragraphs.
Yeah.
I'm looking at paragraph 20, it says, no water line connection of any kind shall be made without first obtaining village board approval. The water limitations set forth in paragraph 3 are exceeded by previous quarter. What you're saying is if they somehow, in the middle of their construction, exceed the amount we're gonna sell, they can't proceed? Is that what you're,
No, it's during this 25-year period. If Pomfret exceeds 27 million gallons a year,
Okay.
at that point, the village would say,
Okay.
you can't, you're not. you
let's
can't sell
get
it."
that put into a place then where it makes more sense. You know, let's move it up to be part of
Yep.
of 3.
Number 7?
20.
Number 20, let's make it part of that. I understand, if they exceed, they can't be adding people to the That's fine, let's get it up where it belongs
Yep.
with paragraph 3. I don't think that's gonna be a problem. They're not, they know they gotta live within the confines of how much they've agreed to sell.
I'm gonna reorganize, I tried to get this as quickly together as I could. and
You're not gonna have time to reorganize a lot.
May I ask?
We get these things resolved, and we pretty much have an agreement of what's here. I want to be able to leave here tonight with some idea of where we're moving things, so they can tell their engineers, and we may be able to get a special meeting to get this thing done.
We can't get a contract signed, according to DEC, until there's a water supply permit. Then, according to DEC, once they issue the water supply
Okay,
permit.
but they need a contract that shows what we're willing to do. So we have the contract that says what we're willing to do. We don't sign it yet, that's fine, they can submit it with their grant.
Yep.
Yep, that's
They
what I'm
move
talking
forward.
about.
But
That's what I'm talking
I
about.
want to get that, I want to have it ready so that it could be signed, and I don't want to be changing a lot. It's not fair to them and their engineers to change a lot if we've resolved these things this evening. And I think number 20 makes more sense. If you're referring to paragraph 3, let's move it up there. If you exceed your quarterly allotment, you can't add anybody until it's resolved. Okay? We've already talked about flow preventers. So we're not gonna have any connections, so we don't need anything in there, or should we still have something in there that if somebody's going to insist on a backflow, that there's a certain style? You guys are gonna totally,
They cannot,
All right.
they cannot.
I think we can
The health
eliminate,
department has said that they will not hook them up to the domestic, the water.
then we should eliminate 21, there's not gonna be any backflow.
Yeah, that's the health department.
It's just, that's one of
I
the
think,
biggest.
And let's have a language in there saying that it's understood there will be no connections to properties if a well is connected to the system. Just simply, we forget the backflow, we're not gonna talk about backflows, we're just not going to allow it, town will be enforcing that.
And so will the health department.
and I think Jack, from our point of view, would want to check that connection to make sure that there's no water well connected. That's something that we want to make sure ourselves.
So So we'll have something in there, but we won't talk about acceptable backflow preventers because we're not going to allow them. So it'll just be language that they cannot be entered.
So take out 21?
Well, Sam's going to modify it to state, we don't need those because there will be no connections to wells.
Under the state sanitary code that governs water distribution systems, you need language that describes cross-connection control and backflow prevention. And the district that's theirs, they'll need to survey and determine those places that require them. And there are places that will require them that don't have wells. Off the top of my head, a little lab in a doctor's office requires a backflow preventer.
Okay.
So they're going to have to adhere to the state sanitary code that covers water distribution system.
Then let's leave 21 in. That way you've got it.
Yeah.
If we need a backflow, it's got to meet these requirements. If you're not going to allow them, we don't have to worry about it. If it comes up a point where somebody says you have to have one, we all agree that it's going to be on our, whatever we're using as specification.
It's really an important thing to have in there.
I just think if they're not going to allow it, I wasn't sure, but if there are cases where even if the health department would allow it, we're going to face that, we might as well have something there describing it, so. It may be something that we can't prevent and we have to allow, so let's keep it in there then.
As long as it says where it's necessary, but not needed for every resident to have a backflow.
But we aren't, yeah, we're not going to,
No problem.
no. This will just leave language in there as to if one is needed, it has to be acceptable to us. I just don't want anybody coming back later saying, since the village is willing to accept them, you have to. And as long as the health department's going to say no, the doctor's office or somebody else in the lab's going to get their thing worked out with the health department, let them do it, and we'll accept it as long as it meets our standard. The second, number 21, town to pay cost to the village engineer. This has probably been the one long-standing issue that has crept up. We obviously had received at one point a very large bid for the cost of reviewing this. We've since, as a board, met with several engineering firms. Once we're ready and we have your actual engineering diagrams, we'll request proposal from the firms we've met and interviewed already to give us a price on it. Now, the decision this board has to make, there are, and I've heard it, we were discussing earlier about our having responsibility for the Leona line and the town having an ongoing obligation for the new water line on West Main Street and the Scanda Drive connection, both of which will be benefits to our system and our customers, because obviously completing the loop on Scandra is something we already spent extra money on a couple of years ago to increase the size of that pipe when that project was put in, so there's a 12-inch pipe there. We complete that connection, we will have a benefit from that loop, and we'll have the benefit from the town. I would, in order to do business and to have those advantages and improvements made for us, consider that we should maybe look at, if we need to have this engineer, have an engineer that we hire and maybe cap, we'd pick up a portion or all of it in return for those benefits that we are going to get from that connection. I'm not even sure exactly what the cost of this finishing the Scandra loop is, but it's got to be more than what even the prior engineering proposal we had was, at $54,000. I've got to believe the value of that 12-inch pipe is more than 54. I tried to get a number from Wendell DeShire, and I have not heard back as to what that estimated cost for that line would be. But I believe if that improvement's going to help our system, and it's more, and the cost of that is more than what an engineering firm would be, that we do our own engineering on that and have somebody look at it. I think with the meetings we've had with the engineers and with our own review of what was the original specification that's going to come in from these firms at less than what our initial proposal was for. I don't know how everybody else feels about it. And that's,
So we're saying we do our own engineering and have someone look at it?
well, ultimately they're gonna have the design from their
Right.
engineer. Our need is to have somebody look at that plan and determine if where they're proposing connections, will it adversely affect our flows? Will it have are there better places from our perspective to make the connections? Are there, those kind of questions that none of us can answer, Jack can't answer. It needs to be somebody who looks at it. We definitely have to have somebody look at their plans to make sure
Right.
decisions on connection points are proper. The question is, we know that we had an estimate at $54,000. There were some things on there, including dealing with the supply up at the reservoir, and we've already discussed that we're not gonna be looking at the supply. This is the engineering part. So we know that's gonna be
Less than the 50.
less than 54. What I'm asking the board is to consider, what do we do with the cost that it's gonna be, somewhere from 0 to 54,000, for engineering work to look at the plans, and on our behalf, say that this will not impact our flows.
They don't have to re-engineer it.
No, it would be somebody, the same as we've had engineers look at car washes to see what the
Right.
impact would be on the
Okay.
water.
Okay.
But this, again, obviously, going to be a little bit larger than one of those. Those we know run a couple $1,000s to have that work done.
Right.
But this would be to look at it, take a look at what the flows are, and determine if we make a connection at this intersection to tap into their system, what will it do to the pressures in that area and at the other end of town? From everything I've seen, I mean, our pressure is so great because of the 24-inch line and the elevation of our reservoir that we may be in good shape, but we certainly don't want to be basing it upon a lawyer's opinion on that.
Right.
Anybody else sitting at this board. So the question is, are we willing to make this project go and to get those sales of water, and for the improvements we're going to get to our system, say that we'll pick up that cost ourselves, and maybe put in a cap, and if it exceeds a certain amount, we may have to go back
Yes,
to them.
I think that's probably where the, the answer's going to have
But I
to
guess that's,
come
if
from.
everybody wants to comment a little bit, I throw that out there as a possible means of getting us
Do
past
we
this.
get any ideas of what that would cost us?
Any idea?
36,000.
36,000?
You do?
That's the original proposal that we received, it was 36.6. If the board would like, we could take these, because it's articulated in this proposal, by task. If they'd like to put this together as an RFP and request for a proposal
Could
from
do
others
that.
like
Could do that.
urban.
And take
Unfortunately,
a
it's-
piece
It's
of
up to
parts.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that's an
I
idea,
mean,
we
if
could
you
put
wanted to
that out,
look
but
at
we,
this
but we need to
proposal, I
have their
copies
plan
for you.
before we can do anything.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But we could at least get somebody
But I
now,
mean-
because we've interviewed 3 or 4 firms.
Did that 36
Send it.
include the reservoir
Study?
review?
This is for the review.
I know, but this include the reservoir?
Yes.
Okay, so we already know that, we've already eliminated one portion of it.
Yep.
Okay, so now we're below 36,000.
No. This is specifically for the Northtown District.
Yeah, but he had in here, what we're saying is, we've already made the decision that we're not looking at the supply at the reservoir. We're looking now at the engineering on the connections and what it will do, connecting them to our pressures and our flows.
So, yeah, so we've eliminated one of the tasks that was outlined in this.
Right.
Yes.
And that was the study of the reservoir.
Is that the
I'm
safe
trying to
yields?
remember.
Is that
I
the
think
one?
so, yes.
The task 3?
Yes.
Okay.
But I think we're, worst case, we're looking at 36, I think.
Okay,
because
okay.
I
Yeah,
can't,
I was gonna say.
so, I thought it was
Okay.
54, so that's better than where I thought we were at. I just think we need to make a decision on this one. This is the one that,
When does this have to be done by? Because this is not a budgeted item.
correct. I would assume that we are probably looking at a few months yet before we get the engineering. We haven't seen their engineering.
So it
I
would be
don't
for
know.
the next budget year?
It could be, or it could be where we get this, we need to go out and get somebody to do the review maybe in April or May. And then, of course, the payment wouldn't come until after the first of the year anyway, so we'd be able to include it as part of the contract.
Do you guys have your
Budget.
engineering done yet? It's already done.
Believe so.
You already got final plans?
Our engineer's done. I'm just,
Yeah, I got a
for all
copy.
the flow rates, I'm sure, wasn't that included in the,
The only thing I've seen are the 2 engineering reports from them guys.
I'm talking about the actual design specifications. That's the thing that
Jim?
we need.
I'll bring them down and look at them.
I mean, we're talking now about the actual layout of the plant, where the connections are gonna be, all that. I was not aware that they had that done yet. If they do, we haven't seen it.
I've got
All right.
construction plans in my office.
All right, that's what we need to have, and then we've got to get, so we're gonna have to, take action to go out for a request for proposals to the firms that we interviewed.
Okay, so we don't have to do this tonight.
No, but what we are gonna wanna do, I think, narrow down what we need to discuss. So this is the
Yeah.
one, I mean, if we want to talk about what we're going to do about the cost, so that they at least can go forward having some idea of what we're willing to do with that engineering, and we make a decision on that, then I think we're going to need to have a meeting to request proposals for, once we get those plans, now that we've got them, request for proposals, ask the firms that we interviewed to give us an idea of what it would cost within 10 days or within a week to make the evaluation, and then hire them to do the evaluation. We're going to need to have a meeting to put that out to bidders. Or for, not bidders, but for requests for proposals.
The proposal here really has got some good points in it. 1 and 2, demands on the distribution system, all that stuff's really important. Village safe yield. And I would want whoever the contractor's gonna be or engineer's gonna be to look at the contract that we drafted mine, because there may be something in there we haven't even thought of that should be in here.
That's fine, but Sam,
Well, we're
can't
not
manage.
really shooting at them, because I think that
Yeah, that's what-
the 36,000 that we haven't budgeted for, I agree with you as far as the benefit to us, but.
I mean, we
gotta
said
know
not to
what we-
exceed,
Not to exceed 20,000, 25,000, what?
well, if we say not to exceed 20,000, and then it comes back where there's absolutely nobody is gonna touch it with that amount, then what do? We make transfers?
well,
We
we're
can't do
we're
it.
either gonna have to put it in the budget to pay them out of next year's budget.
Okay.
Make it a part of the cost that then gets passed on to the users. Or, that's about the only way. Or we could be able to look, because revenues have been coming in above the expectations, we could consider using the unexpended fund balance from that.
It's gotta be
to
all
pay it.
covered by those
The real,
funds.
yeah, the question is not so much of when we pay it, but are we gonna pick up the whole cost, or are we gonna put this out for request, and if it comes in at X number of dollars or some amount, and if it goes above that, we're gonna ask the town to contribute. Do we say if it comes in, we're willing to buy it into it at 36,000, but if it goes above that, because that was the estimate we had, we may need the district to come in and assist us in that. If it comes in less, no, we're not giving you any of the money back, so.
Okay, but if it goes into next year, if it goes into, let me just say, 36,000 is a lot to pass on to users. I mean, we're gonna talk about water rates increase, it's gonna be a big one. And you guys are gonna end up, because your rates are gonna increase. So, isn't that just about the way it's gonna work? It's gonna come back.
Pass
from-
around, back around, yeah.
Yeah, so,
But hopefully, if they've got their plans ready, they're gonna go into construction this season, or this construction season.
Yeah,
The district's also gonna create some more revenue for you when it's in
Right.
place.
Oh,
yeah, well, that we know, but
Without a doubt.
you're still gonna be paying a lot, and it's gonna go, if our water rates go up, and that's the only place we can get this money from, you can't get it from any place else.
No.
And the concern is we go ahead and do this and spend, we commit to the 36, and we're gonna cover our own engineering, okay? We do this, we expend that money now, and we get the contractor to agree the payment will be after June 1st, which puts us into our new budget year. We have to pass that cost along. If this thing, and it's great if that means your construction gets started and we start selling water under this agreement during the coming year. If we don't, we've just incurred $36,000. Maybe one of the things we need is language that we're willing to accept the cost provided project goes forward. And if it doesn't,
yeah.
we need to be reimbursed. I mean, I don't mind putting the money out there to approve a project that's gonna generate revenue for us.
Right.
But like so many others, when we have a contractor who's looking at putting a car wash up, we tell him he has to pay for the engineering to make sure we have sufficient water and wastewater capacity. And if we didn't have them pay for that and we expended it,
And he didn't do it.
and he doesn't build, we would have been stuck with that bill. So we want to make sure we get paid. And again, if we're willing to say we'll cover the cost of our engineer, we need some guarantee back that if this does not happen and we don't start selling water, there's going to be some recovery for that expenditure that the village water users have had to make. Well, but I mean, that's why I think I've put off having an engineer get involved for us until we knew we had actual plans to have him look at. Because I don't want to expend a money that we may not get back, or even if we were telling you you had to pay it back, it doesn't make sense to do it without some, first of all, the plans in place. So now you've got the plans. Now I think we're at a point where if we're willing to accept this cost, we're accepting it because we're gonna gain a benefit from Scander Drive being completed and a new, larger water line on West Main Street, 2,000 feet or whatever it is.
It would seem reasonable that if you fronted the money for, if you covered the cost of the engineering review, that if for some reason the project went kaput.
Has to be charged to the town.
We'd eat it, we'd have, I mean, that would.
To be taxed to those people in that district, not to.
But, yeah.
It would seem reasonable to me, I mean, that doesn't.
If you could confirm that, that might be
Yes,
one.
you know, either you guys have some kind of a resolution or some kind of a,
I mean, we can go forward while we're still figuring that out. We can still go forward. If you've got your specifications and the design, we can go forward. We'll call a special meeting. We'll put out a request for proposals. And get our engineer ready. We won't start expending anything until we've got an agreement that, yes, you guys can, we'll do that. But we'll put it in here that whatever language we can agree on, we'll have that as part of this contract to.
The engineer, I think it's important to know that the engineer may come up with something that might alter the plan of the town. We don't know.
But we fully expect that that's a possibility. That's why we want to have it looked at. And that's why we have the other language in there, that if it's determined that there's a problem, the district has to make sure it's corrected.
Yep.
And then I think the way the language is written, even after it's constructed, if after it's in there and all the engineering had said, well, this will work, it turns out there's a problem with the flow, they're gonna have to correct it. And I think that's in here, so that's there after it's built. I'm more worried right now on costs we might incur and not have it built and we never get that revenue, or they don't go forward, so we don't get the Scander Drive completion and we don't get the new water line on
But
Route
what
20.
I'm saying is the engineer may want to look and make recommendations to Wendell saying, this should be redone a different way.
That's
before they
exactly,
spend all the time.
but that's what we're expecting them to do, Sam, before they start building it.
they've already got their plans done. And before they start building it, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
The engineer's gonna
Can't
review
put the
it.
cart before the horse. The
Right.
engineer's got to look at Wendell's plans before it goes out to bid.
Well, that's why
before
we-
it gets finalized.
So I guess what you're saying is that we're gonna, are we gonna use this as a template of what we need?
Well, I think we need
We're
to,
gonna,
everybody's got a copy, take a look at it.
Right.
Let us, let's all look at it and see what parts of it we really are concerned about. Let's ignore the last 2 pages, which were the estimates for their cost.
right.
Right.
So
And
there are
then,
9 tasks, and we're gonna decide how
which of the
many
9 we
they-
want to put out in a request for proposals.
Okay.
Mike, are you saying that Pomfret would pay the village if the project didn't go through?
That's what we're
For
looking
the
at.
engineering.
Just to kind of fine tune that, how long do they have to get the project through? What if they say, well, it's another year or 2 years and we're stuck with $36,000 engineering bill?
That's what I'm saying, we have to figure that language out. What are we going to do with that? That's what they've got to get back to their engineer and let them know, first of all, this is what we're looking at doing. How soon reasonably do they expect to go, and what are the risks? I mean, I understand you're going forward with or without grants, you're going to get this off the ground. So we're not sitting here saying, well, it could be a year waiting for a grant. You're planning on going, but we're going to need to have an estimate from them as to how soon we'll start making sales under this agreement, how soon Scan to Drive loop, which is the benefit to us, will go in.
Sounds like it
I
ought
mean,
to be.
we don't want that to be the last of the things they do, because if that's the last of the things
That's
they do,
right.
and they do run out of money,
That's
we don't get
right.
what we were expecting. Maybe if we put in there, if we can get some idea from them how soon that will happen, then we could say, if it's not functional within 24 months, then,
Then the bill's got to be
the
paid.
bill's got to be paid back to the village.
Or a certain percentage annually? I mean, so if you're looking at, say, a 5-year plan, I assume you're gonna have this going before 5 years. So, I mean, if it doesn't, I mean, with, like, say, the first year it doesn't happen, a percentage is paid, and then it goes in the second year. So that.
Yeah, so like a bond type thing, yeah.
Or a
Yeah.
vesting schedule in a certain way.
Because of-
When they figure we're gonna have pipe in the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only trouble with putting it off 5 years is that our water rates are gonna go up.
Right.
Without.
Well, that's what I'm saying, using
Well,
that,
the nice thing,
that
look-
percentages annually, that we get money in return.
But everybody they're already selling water to is also going to be paying
Oh,
more.
that's
Yeah.
true.
And I think if you're looking at a year or two out, you're already starting to collect money. So if for some reason the project does not go forward, you've already collected, there'll be money to at least start paying something toward that, because if you have to fold, well, you've incurred that expense. So if the agreement reflects we're gonna cover our engineer up to 36,000, and if the project does not start selling water within X number of months, then in the first year without water sales, we get back percentage.
Oh, yeah.
Say 25% reimbursed. If it doesn't happen in the second year, we get 50 of it back. And if you can confirm with your engineers, then you guys will have a safe idea of how, yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think, if I'm not mistaken, if this thing happens in the year and we get this, you guys break ground and start your construction in the spring, this board is agreeable to, we're gonna cap it at 36, so, because that's what we think we can get it done for.
Possible, if not probable.
But I think it's a big hurdle, because the board's saying we will eat that in return for those benefits and the future sales, which are gonna be important to our survivability of a water producer. But we need to have something in return that if it doesn't go and we don't get those sales and we don't get that line, our consumers get that back. All right. Let us know.
Then
Sam's gonna work on
the
the other.
question, anything over 36,000, they would pay
Then we'll get more grant.
pay for that.
Yeah, if it goes over 36.
Again, I mean, we can't.
I know, but that's where we're at. I think that's the only one that so far really needs, from what I can see, other than redoing the language we talked about tonight,
We're
making
pretty
those
much
changes.
set.
This is the only one that really needs to be spelled out and rewritten
Yeah, the rest
completely
is just more
to reflect it.
And the 36 is from the estimate that we received previously.
That was an estimate we had before, so we're gonna state from that estimate that, we're gonna go from there, because there are some things in there that we're probably not gonna expect from our next, from the proposal when we put it out. Now, it's very possible that we will also get another proposal from that individual or any firm to interview. But, all right, so that's on 21. 22, Sam. Other rules.
Other rules?
Yeah.
Any rule we adopt, they have to follow. So I don't
Contract
think-
can't cover every conceivable thing, so there may be rules regarding building and so forth and so on.
The rules we would adopt would be ones covering all of our consumers, and they would be,
It may be different for the district, we don't know. And
Why?
but whatever we feel is necessary to administer the contract and protect the water supply, as long as it's geared to that, we should be able to have those rules.
Well, that's just like, that's just blank. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, they're just signing up for anything we decide to do.
Well, we could add not inconsistent with the contract.
Okay,
Yeah.
or with the.
We
with-
read them, this is any additional rules and regulations the village determines, that we haven't thought about now, that comes up later on, the board ought to have the right to say, gee, we need to do this. and that's-
Was that sentence in the original agreement that you gave?
Yes.
Was Jeff opposed to that, or?
I don't recollect, he may have been, I'm not sure.
I don't have my paperwork.
I don't have his.
What? Yeah,
I think
well,
that was marked with not knowing, or the boards would have to decide what that meant. I think there's
Yes, I
a
think
question
that- I
mark
think
of
that
some
was-
sort.
It's like, it's similar to Tracker Mohawk or National Fuel Gas that sells gas. There's rules and regulations they have to promulgate for the proper sale of their service. They do it. It's not an arbitrary thing. It has to be connected to preserving the water supply, not inconsistent with what we do.
But I guess I'm trying to envision, Sam, something we're gonna do to them for the 20-some million gallons they're buying that would be different than any other users of our water.
That's why we're putting in, because you can't think of all the things that are gonna happen. So it's a catch-all that gives the ability of the village to say, we need to do this.
you're saying that the words that you could add to this that kind of reduce its scope is within provisions of the contract?
Yeah, not inconsistent with what the village's agreed
Not
with.
inconsistent with the contract?
They were in agreement with it.
Were they on that
According to
one?
this, it says, "Town shall impose any restrictions that
That's
authorize the
the
village for consumers of water." And then water district comment, okay.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the same language as
No,
this
it's
saying that
not.
we have the right to enact.
Yeah, it says, "The village board shall have the right to enact other rules and regulations for district as the village board determines is necessary for the
Okay.
proper administration of the."
So your lawyer was fine with it?
of the village water
That was
supply."
it.
And they said,
It might have
okay.
to do with ministerial things, and we don't want to go back and
Okay.
negotiate a
I
minor,
think
something
they,
minor.
didn't they clarify that it was
It's
to,
kind of like.
No,
all
it
of
just,
us
it
in the
says, town shall impose any restrictions adopted by the village for consumers
Okay.
of water.
Sides.
Okay.
And then the water district comment is okay.
okay, all right. All right, so we're all set on 22.
Yeah, and he said, okay.
He just wanted to make sure it was the language, and then Wendell this year
We
said,
just
okay.
use that language, Jeff.
All right. 23, Sam, right to terminate.
That's the same thing we have in every contract.
Right.
They did add the words that advance notice would be given to the town
Okay.
prior to any cancellation unless it's an emergency.
And
Yeah,
term,
that
term of the
refers back
agreement.
to,
5-year,
earlier.
up to 20, it's 5 years and renewed for an additional 5-year.
I know.
Okay,
That's 30, would not exceed 30.
yeah, 30 years, I think, is what it should be. Yep. All right, and I don't think we have a problem with that. So where we are at is the engineering. I think it's where we probably have been from day one.
Yeah, we need to get you the wall, diagram for the existing.
All right, so we can go out for a request for proposals. Now, in order to get that moving, our next regular meeting would not be until February 14th.
14th.
Do we think we'd be in a position to agree on what we want to put in a request by the end of the week? Call a special meeting to put out a request for proposals to review.
As far as total, like, saying
Yep,
this here.
yep, modifying that, do you think?
end of the week?
Yep.
Mean to
I
have
mean,
that-
bottom line is basically taking a look at these things that are listed as the outline of what one person thought we should be doing, and looking at that and being ready to release it as a request for proposals from the engineers. What we would do is they'd have a special meeting to approve the request and a deadline for the returns of any engineering firms.
Can we do it Monday morning? I mean, what, 2 days, I mean, would it make a difference if we went to Monday morning?
I'm just thinking if we could have it ready by the end of the week, or
Oh.
how much time does everybody think they want to go over that, so that we can get some idea here. They're gonna get their plans to us. I don't have a problem doing it at some point on Monday of next week, if we could be ready to do it Friday. Because if we could have it ready and put it out Friday, get people, just
You're
trying
talking
to do
about
it.
Friday sending out the
Having a
request for
resolution to-
RFPs, mailing them
Having
out.
a
and asking
resolution
them to-
approving an RFP, yes.
Yeah, and then having them return it within,
Right.
an engineer's
I
got
know.
at least 2 or 3 weeks to.
That's what I'm figuring, is to give people 10 days to respond, and then award a contract at a subsequent meeting, or special meeting, or our meeting on the 14th.
Okay, Friday?
I think 10 days is short for this type of thing. You're gonna wanna
No,
go out.
you know what,
scope
Sam, I
it.
think they've all the engineering firms that came through here and interviewed with us knew this was one of the things we were looking for. I don't think they're gonna need that much time.
Yeah, I don't think they knew the scope of the project, though.
I think they have all been watching what the scope of this project is. I'm sure they know.
My whole day shot tomorrow.
Can you give us till Monday? I don't know.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. Let's agree, how about Monday afternoon, like about 4:30? We'll shoot for that. If there's a problem when you're looking through it, or
Oh,
if,
good. Okay, yep.
we don't have to give the notice until Friday anyway for the special meeting. We'll shoot for a Monday afternoon to get the request out, expecting to have the responses back by the 14th, so that we can go to bid. We'll also, by that time, we'll have a contract ready anyway, and if we can have the contract ready to adopt at that special meeting.
Now, when you say adopt, you don't talk about.
Not giving me
formally
authorization to
approving.
sign it, but authorization to say, this is what we're presented, here's the contract.
So it's an intent.
There's the intent, they can send it to their application. If we got the
As long
Dunkirk
as it's
one ready,
unsigned, 'cause the engineers may come back and say, you should add this to the
that's
contract.
fine, but we
and
should be
stuff.
able to get that to them in advance, so they've got a chance to review it. We can, at the same time, that way we're not wasting any time on the agreement. We get the engineering firms in here by the middle of February with their proposal by the end. In the meantime, you're still going forward with your application, and hopefully we get somebody in here, so by March, we can have our engineers say, yes, this is suitable to us,
Water storage.
you know.
Yep.
All right.
Huh?
And we'll try, and the only thing we still got to come up to terms, and you guys have to talk to the engineer on that. How soon do they expect to really get going, and what would be a reasonable time for you guys to agree with us that if it's not done or started, that we get a percentage back on the engineering costs that we incur. All right.
We'll try to give you some numbers as soon as we can.
All right. Anyone else have any other comments or questions on this? Okay, so we're not going to have we're not going to call for the special meeting right now. We're anticipating something on Monday afternoon. Notice will be sent out to the media and the public prior to noon on Friday if we're going to do something Monday for a special meeting. All right. Anything else for the meeting at this point?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
If there's anyone out there not sleeping, National Fuel Gas has just come out with a $4.3 million grant for individuals that are having difficulties paying for their gas bill. You can contact the 1-800 number on their bill for requirements and incomes and ages and whatnot. So saw that in the Wall Street Journal.
If people have already been, is it applicable if they've already been turned off to get them reconnected or not?
I did not see that. I only saw the grant money that was available.
That's above and beyond the heat.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
Yeah,
it is correct.
another
Yeah.
thing.
Anyone else? If not, a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second?
All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried?
Yay.